Blessings. This topic is a conversation that I had with a retired cop that was guided by my angelic father. If you're a police officer, if you're a survivor of domestic violence or physical, emotional, spiritual violence, if you're a healer, practitioner, this conversation might have something to enrich you, plant a seed, or just show the journey of my healing ancestrally. So, welcome to the Heather Ann Ferri channel. We would love to have you subscribe, obviously. And yeah, every time you like and you comment, you are actually initiating conversation with my angelic team as well. So, blessings. Okay, so where do I want to begin on this subject matter? Yesterday, I ended up having over a 3 hour conversation with a retired cop that I did not plan on having. Obviously, he has a podcast, but we ended up having a conversation off the recording and then on the recording. And I will post that when it comes up. We will be doing more podcast interviews, but I really wanted to share what happened, what really happened behind the scenes as well. Um, as soon as Michael is his name, ironically, I talk about angelic Michael. And then I talk about Archangel Michael, the protector who I've been working with every day consistently since I've closed the doors on the book of me and my ancestors' past lives. And so, it was interesting that his name is Michael. And we started just having pre-interview conversation that led down. I could feel my heart chakra opening. I almost wanted to cry. And I knew this was guided by my father on the other side. I have a lot of serious issues with police officers, and I'm going to share that today. Some of it I've never shared before, ever, and it's a full sort of empowerment for me. So Michael is retired because he's disabled. He ended up becoming paralyzed, losing his ability to walk. And the doctor said, he'll never walk again. And he refused to accept that diagnosis, which leads us into another warrior, somebody that I can relate to, because one of my first moments was when I was losing my ability to walk with my legs and really scared about what am I going to do? How am I going to feed myself? This is serious stuff. When you are physically abusing somebody, it's a serious sentence, a debt that we're not taking seriously right now, that we're not talking about on those levels. And so we already shared a common thread in that sense. And the good news is through the years of him going outside the box himself, he is walking. He's still disabled, um, and doing a lot of beautiful studies in the healing arts and in cooking, Italian cooking. So I was like, oh, of course, my dad loves you. But he was describing the cooking differently from Italy than from America. America puts tons of sugar and tons of salt in. And that's not what Italy does to make things spicy. It's just like a drop of this and a drop of that and the subtleties of it. So he's a very, very much into the healing arts. And I ended up sharing with him uh, my stalking situation, which some of you know about if you've been following my post. I was stalked 2000 and I don't know if it was 18, 19. I think it was 2019. Yep. And by a retired cop that moved into my apartment complex. And what happened is that nobody was helping me. I would wake up, you know, reporting 911, and the police officers kind of didn't take me seriously. Even though, somebody was putting roses on my front door every day and religious stuff. And, knowing my mom, how she used the Bible against me as a tool of, justifying her torture. I was concerned about mental illness with whoever was doing this. This wasn't a normal behavioral pattern. And, what happened is realizing the cops weren't going to do anything, our cameras, the manager was out of town. Nobody knew how to even get the footage of the cameras of the front door because I lived on on the first floor. So there was all these mishaps of people just not knowing how to protect, knowing how, not how to use the, like, if you have a camera set up, not having a staff that knew how to use it and how to download it so you could review footage. So there was a lot of mishaps. And when I went to the police station locally, the cop reminded me of my brother at the time, very patronizing, very jokestery, very like, it would, it's probably just a crush, very much like blowing this off, and took the roses home for his wife, which I was like, energetically, the intent when somebody gives you something means so much more than just what they're giving you. And they don't teach that in United States materialism, stuff. You know, I've had many men want to buy me a date, meaning want to buy me. And I'm not for sale in that way. So I've seen a lot of men in this city really use money to try to control women and to dominate them. And so I've had, there was just a lot that came out through the stalking situation. I ended up having to pull in a student, Agent Confusion, which is in my book series, um, and to help me. And, he went to the police station with me when other men, my brother didn't show up to help me. Uh, and honestly, Mystery Man showed up for certain things, but other things did not show up to help me. And so I'm asking, a predator from my past lives that I didn't know he was a predator at the time to help me. And in some ways he did help me, which was a karmic cleanup. In other ways, he became a predator in a different way, you know? Um, but what happened at the police station was awful. I mean, I was a taxpayer, I was a yogi, I was in the paper, I was helping community, and I was treated so poorly. I wasn't even allowed to see the judge. They took me out into the parking lot, kind of like the Matrix, and was bullying me into silence. They were like, "This is a retired cop. We're not going to do anything here." And I was like, I just want a restraining order. I just want a restraining order so that this person is recorded for what they're doing. This is not normal behavior. This was going on for over a month. And my PTSD, I'd lost my sleep, I lost my health. Um, and I was scared because it triggered ancestral stuff, really deep stuff. What was interesting is I remember crying, just crying nonstop because of all the stress, the layers of stress. And I remember sitting in the little office to see if they're going to, basically let me see the judge or not. And basically, what Agent Confusion said to this guy who was completely coldless, like he was just cold. Um, he said, "Do you have a daughter?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Well, could you put yourself in her her shoes right now and think of this woman as your daughter?" Which was brilliant. I have to give Agent Confusion some bonus points on that one. Um, because that kind of startled him. And then he went back in. And as we're sitting there and I'm just crying and crying, because this sort of fluffed over of men being able to behave certain ways, talk certain ways, use their money in certain ways, is really old to me. When you really understand domestic violence, rape, and you understand the extensiveness of charts, how many numbers are really in the game of that, which this cop did, by the way, that I'm going to get into, then you really understand that we need to start reprogramming men in particular in behavioral patterns, right? We need to have them heal their generational traumas, whether they were predators or abusers, so that they can come into some emotional, spiritual intelligence. But so I remember sitting there and a Black man turned around and he said, "I heard your story outside." He said, "Get a gun." That's my advice. And I was crying. I said, "Thank you." Now, this is after COVID happened. I did, I went and started training and got a gun. But at the time I didn't want something, not know how to use it and all that stuff. So I, I wasn't allowed to see the judge that day. Nothing happened. So because there was no report made, My apartment complex couldn't legally kick him out. So here's the example. The predator gets to stay, and the victim who built a community there for 10 years has to leave. Take that in, because that's what we've been living in. So for me, I shared with him some of the story, and I could tell by his whole auric field that he was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. And when he said those words, because of who he actually is, and because of what he's actually experienced in his career and his life, I knew he meant that. And it was one of the first times I've ever heard somebody say that I'm sorry to me in my whole life. I've had so many people really betray me and act inappropriately. And you'll learn that as you start to learn my storyline. And it's because of, people not wanting to take ownership, people not wanting to address their own shadow side. And it was really empowering to hear him say that. It was new to me. I was like, oh, wow. Because it wasn't just like saying it just to sort of cover over the conversation because you're uncomfortable. There's people who say sorry for that reason, right? And then he went on to, he said, there are bad people in every profession. And I said, you're absolutely right, because I've experienced it in every profession. There are psychopaths and narcissists. So you're exactly right. And I said, I knew it was sort of a tribal thing in that district. And I knew other districts weren't like that. And so I didn't hold a grudge towards the whole police system, but it was a serious situation for me. And he said, I completely understand. And he went on to explain his career to me in domestic violence specifically and some of the projects he did. And as he was explaining his work, I could feel his integrity. I could feel his depth of warrior for women in particular. I can't believe I'm feeling these emotions today. Yesterday, I had a lot of emotions with him, beautiful emotions. We had a great recording. Can't wait to share it. Um, yeah. And he went on. So we ended up having this great recording. We went into a lot of different lanes because he ended up studying the healing arts, music, and all that. He feels that that's a huge part of healing. And we ended up talking about a lot of different aspects. He was really interested in ancestral healing. Some of the moments that I want to share right now, and then I'm going to go deeper into the police officer stuff, ancestrally, that I did not mention to him that came up after our conversation. And that's what happens. He was asking me about my work, and I said, really, what I'm guided to do in private sessions now is lead through chanting, lead through a meditation, and lead through the ancestral awakening their ancestral lineage so that they can start to tap into their ancestors. They can start to tap into their light. And I said, I was always doing that in my career with sciences, um, and not knowing it, but that's really, I'm the energizer light that awakens the light within and starts to start that person on their healing process. I said, I really do think I have a trauma blueprint that is very science based, but also ancestral based to help heal out the generational bloodline issues and to help somebody come into God, goddess consciousness, mother, divine, holier consciousness. But I said, but some of the moments in the conversation was at one point when I was talking about specific things, he said, I think you're a very courageous woman. And I never heard anybody say that to me. And because of his background, um, it really, it really imprinted in me. And just throughout the conversation, I could tell, like, by the words and the choices of the words, that this man really valued and respected and believed my stories and believed in my gifts. And not that I need somebody to, but I've had so much opposition all my life, so much bullying, so much gaslighting, so much trying to get me not on stage, trying to get my work not out there, that you know, it does take truly coming into full healing, authentic self to just be on platforms and keep going through all of those swords coming at you. Um, and so, uh, that those words really penetrated into my soul. Um, the other thing we started to realize, because we got into water a little bit, there we pretty much went into a lot of different categories with ancestral healing. When I mentioned John Horse and Harriet Tubman, when I voiced them, I saw him smile and his whole auric field lit up for the first time, and the only time in the conversation of 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And that really surprised me. And I realized that I am a vessel for speaking for my ancestors, and that people want to hear about them. And that I could tell he admired John Horse and Harriet Tubman, and that I need to speak about them in greater detail. And so that threw me off. I did not expect to see so much light when I started to just speak briefly about them, because I guess I can go into this right now. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of years that were spiritual battles with different tribes that I was not prepared for, but obviously understand now that I'm out of it. But I always thought that I would come into this other tribe, which was Black, and that they would sort of be the connectors of, yes, she's a part of this bloodline, blah blah blah, sort of the approval. And when that didn't happen, when I realized there were a lot of karmics and a lot of the ancestral, this was an actual spiritual battle. um I just was like, well, people are just going to think I'm crazy, I mean, I'm just this pure white angelic soul, and what I realized in that moment with him, it was just like, I'm not white or Black. I am truth. I'm truth. And I think the real people can sense that. And so I don't need anybody to approve of what I know about my ancestors and that they are my ancestors. And so he gave me that gift, because the way his whole energy changed, and honestly I think he wanted to hear more about them, you know, and I wasn't really ready for that, but it was kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. Um, we did talk a bit about the water, but we're going to talk a lot more about it in another segment, because we talked offline. But what I learned, I don't think he shared this on the recording. What I learned is the male, he's living in a different state. He wasn't raised in Pittsburgh, but his family was. So his grandfather, his great grandfather were from Pittsburgh, Allegheny, like my area. And one of them was a police officer here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he was trying to take down the mafia, which is fascinating to me. And things did not go well for him. He was in essence murdered, and I won't share those details because they are kind of intel of systematic programming. But so as I started to explain to him, some of the water issues, which the state he lives in, he says the water's horrific, and he knows it because in another state he used to drink more of like a river water, and when he moved, he was like, it's horrific. There's cancer everywhere. And I said, I know. I said, the stats don't lie. So we got into details about that, and he had some really solid ideas about how we could go about educating the public. So I took that in. And at the end of our conversation with that, because we didn't expect that to happen, he said to me, I think your father led this conversation today, led us to come together today. And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we could have talked for a few more hours, but we both had to go. What I got from it afterwards, besides just having that recognition from a stranger, but another soul on a journey, is I want to share my journey with police officers now. That he didn't hear all of that because we were there to talk about trauma and the theater arts and Jimmy Slide. And so that's what this part is about. When I was young, probably around 7, 8, 9, when the abuse was happening to me behind closed doors with my mother, it was common back then to carpool. So I went to dance class 4 nights a week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so sometimes my mom would drive the kids, or sometimes another mother would drive us. That was common, just like baseball. And so I was in the car with my friend's mother, and she got pulled over by a police officer. And she drove me home. And the next day, that mother called my mother and she said, I want you to know Heather was really scared when the police officer came. She looked terrified. And I just wanted you to know that because the mother wanted my mom, to explain that police officers are good people. Well, my mother really didn't have much psychology going on at that point in time. And I think she just said, you don't need to be afraid of cops. But for me, I was terrified of cops. Um, and what was going on in the little girl's head at that time is I thought, he's going to find out I'm bad. He's going to find out I'm bad and he's going to take me away. So when I talk about being physically attacked and almost murdered to death by a mother's hands, and the psychological warfare of screaming horrific things in me, I do know a lot about healing trauma. My toolkit works, and we need it in society now. So we're not even talking about all these Black women, of course, that were either stolen or trafficked or domestic violence, and their relationship with police officers, which you can imagine, especially in the the 1800s, 1700s, was probably like zero. So I remember jumping forward when I'm back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm driving, and I'm just starting to unravel trauma, which is really scary because my body's starting to do things that I can't control. And being a dancer and being OCD, which I had to laugh about with Michael, the police officer, because he was saying, I'm just going to go with the flow with this conversation, even though I have questions, because people, when I first started, thought I was interrogating them. And he's like, I'm not trying to do that. So I'm just going to go with the flow. And I had to laugh inside because 4 years ago, when I was trying to unravel corruption in a company I was involved with, people were saying, you feel like a lawyer to me, like, because I was so asking questions and nobody could give me clear answers. And I was upset about it because my job, my company was on the line and all this stuff. So I had to laugh. Me and Michael have a lot more in common, you know? I said, I totally get it. But as I was doing energy work and starting to get trauma to come out, which was like a volcano, And so sometimes when people have a lot of trauma, you don't want to pull it all out at once. They can't handle it. That's why, in general, we're hearing a lot about exorcists right now. And I have a book, People of the Lie, is a great book about, a psychologist that studies evil and realizes there is a purpose for healers. And that's a different job. And I respect the fact that that writer went down that road, but exorcist is a really serious job. And I did some without knowing how serious it was. I wouldn't do it again without somebody signing a legal contract. And he talks about that, and I agree with it. I think people have to be responsible, even if they are demonic, for the consequences that happen in that sort of process of healing, because it is complicated and you can die from it. And everybody needs to be held accountable for what they're doing. So I feel there's deeper consequences to that. So when, as a healer, I was always concerned about, okay, if we're pulling this out, can they handle that pain? Can they handle that emotion? Can they handle, because I don't have a rehab and they're going to go home to what? To nothing. It's hard to be in silence. Try to be in silence for 2 weeks. Try to be in silence for 4 months. Try to be in silence for a year with not people around you. Then you're going to work out all your triggers and ancestral lineage stuff. So I was always cautious of that, because a lot of times I had early on, when somatic shaking and healing were coming to the table of education, people would come to me and they would be freaked out, because if somebody's screaming and shaking and, and they're getting red and you can't handle that space, what are you going to do? That's why when I was in Mexico doing healings, and I had a healing from, there was a Jesus Mother Mary experience, and healers their jobs need to be taken seriously, or, healers, you need to listen to this, like, to keep up with your own health, right? Where you're not having parasites in you, you're not a sugar addict or a caffeine addict, that you're able to stay clean. You shouldn't be working all day long. That's for sure. It's not a profession that should be working all day long. Red flag if you are. So when I was going through this experiences, when I would drive and I would see a police officer, my heart would start to race. So I had ancestral fear over police officers. I mean, look at the Keepers story, the documentary on Netflix. I mean, that was a whole tribe that supported sexual abuse with children. That was police officers. That was the medical field. That was the church. Okay? Let's be real about it. So the deep fear, I did not know who could protect me. The protection link is a huge question with a lot of the women, not necessarily John Horse and Harriet. They were protectors, but most of the other lineage, Anastasia and the other women, there were no protectors. That's why I honor John Horse and Harriet Tubman as heroes. That's why I could sense that this man that I was speaking to yesterday had character and depth and integrity. And, who knows? I would love to see police officers trained more in meditation, intuition, healing, PTSD brain protocol. I'd love to see them with the water systems. These are the things that I wish our billionaire club would be focused on a little bit more in society than just the IA. Are they disconnected from the soil and the water? Are they disconnected from their own spiritual lineage of healing generational trauma? Does it even occur to them? Or is it just, I own everything. It's all good, even though everybody's dying and sick. We'll keep operating, make man-made things. I don't know, right? What about human development? What about human healing? So for me, when I was shaking out early on, it became aware of the fear of police officers. Jump forward, then I go through the stalking. I'm not really protected. Jump forward, I go to the first tribe. I'll get into it right now. Might as well. I At this point, COVID is happening. I am highly working with the Divine Mother, Mother Mary. My spiritual gifts and healing gifts are strong, even though they're not really honored in my environment in this particular city. They are with people who fly in. People who fly in all over the world praise me. My city, not so much. Karma, but karma in the sense that these people stole the land. Like a lot of people here stole the land, don't understand the land, and keep like sort of killing the land. So if we ever get to the truth of the Pennsylvania, the healing, waters of Pennsylvania, we'll get to the truth of who actually owns the land, right? And who actually understands the land. So with within the COVID period, I was guided into doing a nutrition health program. I mean, mother was constantly, you need to do this. And she kept putting a specific man on my social media channel over and over again. I was turned off by this company because years ago, and I talked about this in one of the deep water videos, so you can go back to the deep water videos. When I'm sitting across from a client who is justifying, frauding out seniors millions of dollars and, you know, doing what she does with her husband, she worked for this company and she said, "Oh, you would love the CEO. He's just like you." Well, I don't really agree with her psychology. So I was really turned off. But mother was persistent. And so I finally contacted the particular person she kept putting on my feed, who now I know is a sex predator. I do believe he is healed from that. He's a narcissist and he is very twisted with religion. That's my view. I send him unconditional love, but that's my view. And I was very unconditional love to him. And he knows that. He absolutely knows that. I do the program, and honestly, there's about 8 products that are great. There's 2 products that are game changers for Americans. And that's what kept me in the business longer than I wanted to be, because I wanted people to get what they needed to heal. That was always my motivation. It was never about my well-being, which is not good. Now it's about my well-being. It's a shame that these 2 products are really very important for American health, and it's a shame that this company could not do the right thing. What happened was, I was working full-time in trauma at that time, like full-time with my dad, then getting sick. So it's out during that time period. And I was not on social media much at all. My clients were. I had to get one of my clients off social media, because even though she had these products, I felt like my upline was targeting her. I didn't have any proof, but because she was such a traumatized soul, uh, and honestly, she had some money, I felt like they were targeting her. And I said, "You have to get off all social media right now." I didn't have any proof, but I started to see things on their social media that was very it was supporting predators in a twisted way. And I've talked about we live in a predator economy. And I talk about, like, I do feel there were religious and spiritual figures that taught a whole propaganda stuff that really supported predators and really left victims out in the cold. You know, and if you ever really speak to somebody, I mean, I worked full time for 15 years. So, I mean, I am a trauma coach. But if you ever speak to somebody like Dr. Ramani, who wrote It's Not You, who also works every day with narcissists and psychopaths and victims, she starts to break down things that are real and realistic to human psychology that people are not used to because you're programmed by who owns these programs. So for me, I started to see programs like these social media posts that were very not representative of victim or trauma education whatsoever. Now, the two CEOs were married, divorced. One's an angel. One to me is definitely a slave owner from America, from my lineage, and definitely has demonic stuff going on, but is a shaman, I care about the people. I do ceremonies. I, and is severely brain damaged and traumatized. And she is severely brain damaged and traumatized for different reasons. And so they are the leaders of this multi-million-dollar company. And I'm working full time. Like, I'm not a social media person at that time. And I had another older woman who was a slave owner in a past life doing social media. And she saw red flags in their posts. And so sometimes I would get on to see it, and sometimes I wouldn't have time to see it because of I mean, I'm a one woman show. A lot of people don't realize how hard it has been. You don't have a secretary, you don't have anybody to bill, you don't have anybody to, I mean, it just, that's why I hit rock bottom. You know, it became too much. And, you know, you'll find all the volunteers in the world with these corruptions, even in churches. But for somebody who's actually healing people, very hard to find volunteers. And I really want to state that, because if you have the time and the energy, reach out to a healer or somebody that you know is doing good in your community and say, how can I assist you? If you really believe in karma, how can I assist you? So I mean, it was a blessing when I worked for a year and a half in an alternative clinic, because I could just go in and do my job. I didn't have to deal with the appointment scheduling, the billing, the negotiation of money. The front woman secretary did that for me. It was like, this is amazing. But the IRS came in because we had a very specific medical device that wasn't FDA approved, and blah, 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 blah. I could tell you a good 100 stories on things like that. You're not going to see a lot of that. It's being wiped off social media, just so you know. Alternative healing is being wiped off social media as we speak. I won't be speaking in great detail about the Japanese medical device online. You will have to do private Zooms, conferences, workshops to empower your communities, your families. And you might say, well, just fight back. Who's protecting? Who's protecting who? Because I know a lot of healers that were taken out in my life. And I deserve to have a much better life than I have right now. And that's what I plan on having. But I'm speaking truth today. Because the reality that Americans have is not correct on a lot of things. You've been brainwashed by Hollywood and by the big influencers for too long. The big influencers have a lot to learn about the people as well. And maybe if Charlie Kirk was around, he would be speaking more and more to people like myself. was a deep dive. I felt like that was channeling in somebody. Am I channeling in somebody? I am channeling in somebody. Okay. Can you guess? So, police officers. Oh, so, and then the health. Okay. So I'm working for this company and I'm starting to shake. Oh, okay. Right before my dad died, or right before my dad went in the hospital. This is what I'm going to share. Right before my dad went in the hospital, I get a phone call from my business partner from this company because I'm distributing these products. If something works for me, I distribute it. I say no to like 100 products. Water is essential. It is the foundation. What I've seen electrolyzed water do is unbelievable. So, you can have all these products in the world. I go to the foundation, but because of these two herbs, there was two herbs, one that dealt with glyphosate and one that dealt with parasites that were game changers. I mean, I had clients that they had lists of supplements. We're talking like $5,000 a month. I had clients that they've done everything under the sun. So you're talking to somebody that's been around the block. So that's what kept me with this company because I was like, God, I just want this to work, right? Everything else in their products, okay. Some of them, hey, not good. I'm very sensitive, but these two products with the clinical research, it's like, they're important. So, and I get really detailed. Like I've gone through like at least 400 ionizer machines. So people like don't understand. Like, I don't try to like make people feel bad that they bought something that doesn't really do a whole lot and definitely doesn't take out forever chemicals, but I kind of like know what I know, and so I don't say much. And then I'm just like, you can upgrade, you can change, you can change, you can change what you have in your house. Right. And it might change your perspective on business. So this person was a narcissist, sexual predator, and he would admit that. He actually did admit that to me at one point. So I'm not like saying anything that isn't a surprise. Because actually I think he was used as a tool to get to the big guy. So I mean, maybe that's part of his healing of of our karma together. Is that's the way I take it. I surrender him. I surrender all contracts to the Divine Mother, to the Holy Family. But at the same time, he was a pain in my butt. And he was a stalker. I mean, I have stalkers that want my money, that want my energy, that want I have good karma. I know that now. I've earned it. Not many people have earned, people might have lots of money, but they don't have honor. We can't live in a world like that anymore. So when people are, on these platforms and they've had success because they've had success from making success from kind of not being a great person, you have karma to clean up. I want to see the police officer yesterday succeed more because I could tell by the 3.5 hour conversation we had that could have gone on. I could tell the depth of character and integrity he has. It wasn't fluff. It wasn't that charisma. Don't I look good? I'm going to talk to you guys today. I'm going to talk and I'm going to say all this intelligent stuff and I'm going to go, oh, you're not. And it's going to be great. No. Have you been in the trenches? Have you helped the innocent? Have you helped those that have been hurting? So the phone call. Oh, we're follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow. I have a whole Dorothy script, whole keynote, whole TED talk. Send it out. Let's go. I'm ready. I have a water TED talk too, by the way. So if you're in a city and you're involved with TED Talks, because I've been trying to look at the applications, they're not really many are up yet. I have 2 TED Talks that I feel are very unique. I get a call. This is right after Christmas. This is right before my dad goes into the emergency room. And it is my business partner who has never spoken to me. He has been gaslighting me, disrespecting me. The men, American men in my upline, disrespecting me, very arrogant, religious crap. And I hate to say it that way. I'm not trying to offend religion, but I'm being very clear about this situation. And I pick up the phone. I'm surprised he's called me. And I'm thinking, oh, we'll do a business meeting. We'll do videos, to promote. And it ended up being a very, very, the weirdest conversation I ever had in my life. He was basically, how do I put this? He basically told me that I had a dark spirit inside of me, which right away reminded me of my mom. And said that he would fly out. I didn't even ask for any of this for $300, which is an interesting number because that number is connected to the Lost Waters in Pennsylvania. And to assist in blah, 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 blah. Now I'm like, I've been in a professional healing arts career. I worked in a alternative trauma center where my boss had science degrees and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like this is not professional. And at the same time, my dad's trying to call me, but like he's not calling me because he never called me, but he like must have hit my phone number, but it was like trying to call me to cut off that. Or maybe it's just an inkling of this is part of our ancestral, slave owners, which they were, my upline, and this one CEO, guaranteed, hands down. So, but because I'm not Black, they're not seeing it, right? That's the disguise, but their behavioral patterns completely treated me as if I was, right? He's manic, one of those, I talk really fast and I have all these great intelligent ideas and this and that and this and that, but I'm really manic and I have a lot of OCD and trauma inside of me, but I'm not going to really do that generational trauma and feel the pain and have to go back and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to really talk intelligently. And I have all these great ideas. That was his energy. People loved him online. And so he was going to move because he found his soulmate. He was divorced, had 2 boys. He loved his children, loved being a father, hands down. And I immediately went into, do you think that's a good idea? Like, that's a really huge jump for your children. They're going to be away from their mother. And he just kind of, it'll be fine. It'll work out. Long story short, didn't work out. I was going to report him, but then like literally the next day or the next day, my dad goes in the emergency room. So I'm then in that for 6 months, like all that stuff that happened. By the time I got out of that, so I didn't work on the business, I set all that aside. Then they started to attack me. And then weird stuff was starting to happen. Long story short, there was one person in my upline, not from America, from another part of the world, who was the only one who cared about when my father was dying. And he was like checking in on me and giving me protocols that my mom and everybody refused to do. So I couldn't do them, even though there was science behind them, like science. And long story short, throughout a year and a half of this period, we come together to do a few videos. I've actually taken them down for energetic reasons, but we started talking about sugar addiction. We were starting to talk about parasites. We were going to do a fourth video. And that morning I woke up and I was like, we cannot do this video until I talk to him about the real parasites, which is the men in our upline. And my Zoom would not work that day. It's never happened again. But so we ended up talking on the phone. And in that conversation, he confessed to me about what was happening with him, which was one of his business partners had gotten a porn video, and there was a lot of sexual stuff happening with our upline, with our CEO, and that he was trying to address the CEOs with trauma education and proper guidance for the victims. And now the whole opened up. My instincts were right, even though I was working 24/7. My intuition was right about the posts that I was seeing, and the lack of trauma education and how predatory works. I was really upset and angry because my job, my company was on the line. I take trauma work very seriously, just like this cop. And the fact that they also we're health coaches, we're yogis, we're shamans, we're religious. So we're not going to, yeah, they're all categories here. Okay. Let's be very clear about that. And they're all self-righteous in their own ways. And so it got really, really messy. I talk about this in book 2 to book 3, and I surrender it to the Divine Mother. I mean, I cut cords, I cut the contracts. I felt like I always feel like the bad guys win. I do. I feel like the bad guys win. I felt that way with this situation. I felt they were very disrespectful to me. They never let me, just like the judge, they never let me talk to them, the CEOs, to file a report on my sponsor, even though I learned that there were many filings of women that filed. This isn't uncommon. For 5 years, I was only in the company for 3 years, so 2 years prior to that. And there was no regulations in the company. There was no education in the company because the CEOs were traumatized. The female CEO didn't want to hear anything about the sexual stuff. She literally was, I'm like a little girl. And even though I wrote a leadership for women book, I don't want to hear anything about it. I don't want to hear anything about it. So I'm going to now have my assistant deal with everything. That's the reality. This stuff's serious. It's no joke when you're playing around healing women from generational ancestral. Look at the picture on Facebook with me with all the rashes and swelling in my body. That's what generational trauma torture does to a woman. And yeah, you can carry it around and pretend like everything's okay and die at 80 or 90 years old and bring it back into the next life. But I wasn't going to do that because I'm a high end healer, ancient psychic, and I don't use it for wrongdoing. So they didn't even want I wanted to dismantle from the company and buy those 2 products from my friend on the other side of the world. And it took 7 weeks to do that when it should have taken 3 days. Now, during that process, I had visuals of some of the upline, so I knew that they were predators from my ancestors in America with slavery. And honestly, if any of them see the video today, I hope they do. I'm here for an intelligent spiritual conversation. And about all those years, you threw the victims of women and young women as if they asked for it, as if they attracted it in. So I broke this in the conversation with Michael yesterday. This law of attraction stuff I don't agree with. I did not attract in this tribe because I was trauma based. I attracted this tribe in because I followed the Divine Mother's orders, because I am a warrior like Harriet Tubman and John Horse. What are you? What is your life? Now, many victims do attract in this stuff, and I wanted to protect them because I could see the posts that should have been illegal from this company. You should have standards like most direct sales companies, most MLMs have standards with posting. You shouldn't have a naked butt showing on a post. You shouldn't have terminology that's not really trauma based good and then twist it around as if you're healers or health coaches or whatever. I was just simply wanting to offer legal legal issues to protect the victim in this company, which they had in Europe. Oh, they had it in Europe, but they didn't have it in America. And I wanted to educate the CEOs and bring in trauma education. I got kicked out. I got psychically attacked, sucked dry, kicked out. Yeah, I've learned a lot. And I was telling this to Michael off camera. I said the last 5 years have been extremely challenging, but I have beyond more respect for John Horse and Harriet Tubman, which most people, even in their lineage, don't have a clue. If they did, they would challenge themselves more in their life and they would tap into their ancestors to be able to actually create new things on this earth. And I said that I really did need to learn about protection in every type of situation. And they put me, Divine Mother put me in every type of situation. And the last situation was extremely complicated. And that's when he told me about what his grandfather went through with the mafia and the murdering of him and how systematic that was. So it's interesting the people I'm attracting in with conversations because it's dealing with justice, which is awesome. It's dealing with people, police, forensic psychologists. It's dealing with that whole arena that's got to be, I'm all for predators healing, but they have to be accountable for what they've done. We haven't really taken in the hours it takes. Dr. Ramani talks about this. If you clocked in the hours that I've had to heal myself, I'd be a millionaire. I'd be at least a millionaire. No funding, no help, full-time blown, nothing but opposition against me. And yet I still believe in the Holy Family, the Divine Mother, because they would never be able to take that away from me. The only thing that I gained is they're the only ones that I listen to. And that's empowerment. I went on a deep dive that I did not expect to go on. I want to finish this talk with saying I'm deeply grateful for the conversations I've had recently. I'm deeply grateful for Michael. And anybody out there who has been a warrior in protecting innocent and victims, particularly. Anybody that has been somebody that has created facilities and healing centers for survivors. I send you unconditional love. I send you blessings. I send you light to continue that work. I would love to offer one of my programs to you, whether it's the water systems, which I think is the foundation It benefits everyone. It benefits the people who are stressed out working with trauma. It benefits the one that are traumatized. You know, I was thinking about the healing of Harriet Tubman yesterday. It was not easy. She had a lot of brain damage, even though she was an incredible person that, you know, flew through the mountains like an angel, flew through the forest like an angel. And she tapped into her intuition, but it didn't mean like part of her pain levels were almost numb, frozen. So she was frozen in some senses, in some ways, in her aspects of her life. And, you know, the swelling, I was telling Michael, the swelling, you know, and having a medical grade water was a game changer for me and my clients. And for people who have never experienced any of this, you've never experienced it. So if you care, then join my mission, join one of my programs, join my team, join supporting me, donate to this channel, subscribe, because it does take an ecosystem. I'm calling it the fairy ecosystem now. I'm leading my own way. That's the biggest thing that happened after this last whole. Maybe I was never meant to fit into a tribe. Maybe I am my own tribe. And the communities and the ecosystem I build will be empowered to be their own, in essence, tribe, to find their own inner truth and their own inner light and their own inner guides and ancestors. There's a lot of mystery behind our past. We will only get that information from going within. We can read all the books that we want. We can talk and analyze all that we want. But like speaking to Michael yesterday, the reason why he had such an incredible impact on my soul with his words is I was speaking to somebody that lived it, that saw it every day, the domestic violence, the energy, the words. Somebody that lived through corruption and mafia and the politics of good and evil. Somebody that was open to the healing arts and understanding how music and dance. And one thing I've been speaking recently about, and I'll finish with this. People have been asking me about the tap dancing tribe more. And I have great stories about Buster Brown, Henry Latang, Gregory Hines, in particular, spiritual stories that make me resonate with them as my grandfathers. But Jimmy Slide was a mystical, magical being. And when I look at all the different tribe leaders that I've had to walk away from, and I now have an experience, that's why I would love to sit down with Savion Glover and have some deep dives with him. I'm sending that out there. I'm sending that out there. I would really love to talk to Savion Glover and know more, because we need to understand the archetype of people like Jimmy Slide. He's so needed right now in the physical form, um, because there just wasn't an ego. There wasn't a color. And as much as, you know, there's only a few footages of him tap dancing, obviously. Cameras were not a big deal back then. We didn't have them. But He was amazing on stage. Obviously, he floated like he was walking on water, tapping on water, right? His smile lit up a room the way people say, my smile lights up a room. His eyes sincerely would look into your soul. He allowed me to feel safe, which was rare. And when you experience something of that type of unconditional love, and then you go through 30 years of tribes where you have narcissists and psychopaths as the leaders that are training people in a certain programming. I miss the tribe. I miss that tap dancing tribe in human form. And I know that in some senses, I don't know how it's going to sound, but I feel like I've been through a lot of psychic attacks and people wanting to honestly take me out. But I feel like, um, how do I say this? Jimmy Slide being around me, Mr. Rogers being around me, Harriet Tubman being around me, John Horse being around me, the Holy Family being around me. I've got my angelic tribe. That's what I bring to the table. When you come into a session with me, it's not about a meditation. It's an activation, and it's just being in my presence. That's what happened with Jimmy Slide, and that's what happens when people are with me. I just now honor. I honor who I am. There were so many times that I could have taken the easy road. There were so many times where I could have sold my soul. There were so many times where I could have took the money deals. I didn't, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. And when I come into money, I'll show the world what holy money can do. I will show the world. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me today. And once again, thank you, my angelic team, and my father for bringing Michael into a very long conversation yesterday, which was healing of my heart. The first person to genuinely say, in a very sincere way, I'm sorry that that happened to you. The first person to ever say to me, you're very courageous in what you're doing. I'm ready for the first of many things. Many blessings.